All right, so now I want to go ahead and start the process of creating a Postgres container utilizing Docker. Now, in the beginning, I told you guys that we'll be connecting our Spring Boot application to a running database. And in this case, I'm going to be utilizing Postgres, and Docker makes that pretty easy. And to make sure that Docker is running on your computer, you can run Docker PS, and it should show either you have a container already running, or in my case, I don't have any containers running, so it doesn't show anything. But if you're able to run the command, that means you're good to go. If not, that means you have to get Docker running to continue on. So now that we confirmed that, just want to also say that you can also do this from IntelliJ, but the sizing of IntelliJ is pretty small, so I just want to use the terminal because it's easy to increase the size. But to actually run a Postgres container using Docker, all you got to do is run a pretty simple command. So it's going to be Docker run. First, I want to provide the container a name to make it easy to understand what the container is doing or what it is. So you can use dash dash name, provided a name. So in my case, I'm going to call it funds app dash db. And then I'm going to provide it some environment variables to specify the Postgres username and the Postgres password. So I'm going to use dash e to define the Postgres underscore user. And this is a environment variable provided by the Postgres image. I'm gonna leave a link to the image description in the Docker registry. So it's essentially documentation on the specific Postgres image, and it will show you different environment variables that are possible to change using the dash e flag. But in this case, it's an environment variable that allows me to specify the user for a Postgres user, and I'm going to use another environment variable flag to specify the password. So it's going to be Postgres underscore password, and I'm going to give it a password of password. Now, obviously, you would want it to be, and I just noticed I put use instead of user, but you want to make sure that you use something a lot more, powerful or stronger or a lot more secure when it's a real application. But in this case, it's going to be running locally, so I'm just going to use user for the username and password for the password. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define the ports, right? So I'm going to use the dash p flag, and the first port is going to be 5432, which is going to define from our local machine what port that we can utilize to reach the Docker instance. And I'm going to separate it by a colon. And I'm going to specify another port, which is also going to be 5432, which essentially says from the internal container, this is going to be the port that's going to be exposed so that anyone from the outside can reach our Postgres container from this port. So internally, it's going to route on our computer any request from 5432 to the internal port of the container that's running Postgres of 5432. So when we connect to our Postgres instance from Spring Boot, we're going to be using port 5432. And then the dash D flag essentially just says this is going to be running detached, meaning it's not going to be running from our command line. It's going to be running in the background. And then lastly, it's going to be the name of the image, right? This is going to be the blueprint, the recipe of how to create this Postgres container with the properties that we just defined. And the name of the image is going to be Postgres, right? This is an official Docker image page for Postgres, which I said I'll leave in the description so you guys can check that out to see all the other different properties that you can define. But this is maintained by Postgres, and this is what we're going to be utilizing. Press enter. It's going to create a hash. Essentially, this is the ID of our container. If I do Docker PS again, we can see now that Postgres is running. It was up 4 seconds ago. And you can see that it's from our internal machine. 5432 is going to be routed to the container port of 5432 using a TCP connection. And the name of it is funds app-db. So we're good to go on that end. Now we can utilize this to connect our Spring Boot application to this Docker instance that's running in its own container. So now we have proof that we have a running Postgres container, and eventually we'll be able to connect our Spring Boot application to this Postgres container so that we can start saving information to it. All right, so now that we have a running Docker container that's running Postgres, what we can do is we can go inside of that container and we can create a database, because that database is going to store our transactions and we're going to need it in the future. So while we're here, we might as well do it. So to do that, to go inside, what we can do is docker exec -it, provide the name of the container, which in my case is going to be funds app-db, and the shell that I'm going to use is bash. So you can specify bash. Press enter, and you can see that I'm the roots user. And what I'm going to do is psql -h, which is the host. We're going to use localhost, and the user is going to be, and I'm going to use -u for the flag for user, is going to be user because I provided the name of user. When I created the Postgres container, my user name was user and my password was password. So I can press enter here, and you can see right here I'm in as the user. If you use another username, then your username will be appearing here. But since I use user, it's going to show up as user. And to confirm that I'm inside, what I can do is a \L, and I should be able to see all the databases that are currently in here. So you can see that it says a list of databases. And by default, Postgres creates a couple, and the default one is Postgres. Now, what I want to do is I want to create my own database, right? Specifically for the funds application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some SQL, right? So I'm going to do create database. Oh, got to spell database correctly though. So create database funds underscore app, semicolon. Press enter. You see that it returned create database. So I expect to see it when I do the \L again, and boom, you can see funds underscore app. And I can even connect to it now if I want to. So I could do \C and specify the name of funds app or funds underscore app. And now I'm connected to funds app as user. Currently there are no tables. So if I do, I believe the command is \D, there aren't going to be, or \DT, there aren't going to be any data tables or any tables to see. But in the future, when we start coding and we start constructing how the entities are going to look like, it's going to generate those tables inside of this space for us. So what we're going to have to do is utilize a string or a database string that's going to specify this specific database that we just created, which is funds underscore app. And all of these saved transactions are going to be saved specifically to this database. So now you guys know a couple of commands that you can utilize to connect to your running Postgres container and how to create a fresh database from there. So, and to exit, you can just do quit. And to exit out of this shell, which currently we're in the container shell now, just do exit. So now you are free. So now we can switch over to IntelliJ so we can start the process of actually connecting to this database.